madness. That is me trying to explain every command in as short time as possible. Now, this is going to be covering 60 commands. Some of them are repeats because they're just aliases. And before I get started, I just want to let you know that this is not going to constitute as like a guide for every command in the game. Not to mention, there are aspects of these commands that are very important to using them that I'm not going to explain as well, such as selectors, and like the individual things that you can put in places like telraw and JSON. But anyways, I'm going to try to explain every command as quickly as possible, so let's just get into it. The first command is advancement. Advancement gives or takes advancements. It sounds kind of boring, but you can use this to trigger on special conditions, such as entering a certain structure or a certain biome. And you can use this to give people rewards or give people information about what's going on. The attribute command lets you change something's attributes or the way that it moves. You can change something's health or something's speed. You can do all sorts of things to the values, obtain, add, remove, and multiply, etc. Boss bar lets you edit boss bars that look similar to the Wither Ender Dragons. You can make boss bars with an ID and a special name, and you can name it really anything you want. You can specify the maximum of the boss bar and the value of the boss bar, who can see it, and if it's visible. But you can't remove players from viewing them, so if you want to make someone no longer see a boss bar, you have to remove the boss bar entirely. Clear lets you clear items from players. You can clear a specific item, type, and NBT. You can also specify how many to remove, so if you set the count to 0, it won't remove anything, but it will tell you how many of that item someone has. This will be useful later. Clone lets you copy blocks from one volume to another. There's 3 modes that you can copy in. Replace replaces everything at the end location. Masked replaces everything that is not air. And filtered lets you pick what type of blocks to copy after the clone. You can pick 3 additional settings. Force forces the copy even if it covers the source. Move is like cut, it removes the original source. And normal is the default and just copies if the source and destination don't overlap. Data is a way to handle MBT and JSON components. You can get, merge, modify, and remove MBT from non-player entities and storage. This can be used to edit attributes, villager trades, and much, much more. Data storage is ultimately the ultimate way to save, read, and edit information without needing any entities or scoreboards or mumbo jumbo. Data pack lets you control what data packs are running in your world. Data packs are kind of like plugins or mods for vanilla that centralize all your changes to the game in commands and make it easy to share. Debug lets you start, stop, and report what's happening in your game. It's a good way to get a full report file of what is happening with your commands or entities. Default game mode sets the default game mode that people are in when they join your world for the first time. It's a good way to make sure that players are in the right mode on the server. Difficulty lets you change the difficulty of the world. This lets you make sure that the world is in the desired difficulties, such as easy, normal, hard, or peaceful. Effect gives or takes players and entities potion effects. For each effect, you can edit the duration and the amplifier, and finally whether or not to display the particles. The maximum duration you can put is 1,000,000 seconds, and the amplifier can be up to 255, but for some effects like jump boosts, if you go above 128 or 127, then the effects are inversed, so then you can't jump at all, or your jump is reduced. Enchant lets you enchant the items that a player is holding. It is limited to the default levels, so you can't get sharpness 1,000,000 this way. Execute is the most complicated command. There's 12 options to choose, and unless you use run, you can use as many in a row in any combination that you want. With execute, your goal is to change the position a command is running and what is running the command. You can change who plays the command using as. You can change where the command is played with align, anchored, at, facing, in, position, and rotated. You can make the execute chain continue or stop using if and unless conditionals. You can also store the output onto various places, which can be useful for, say, putting the amount of apples somebody has in their inventory on a scoreboard, combined with the clear command, which tells you how many they have. It's a very useful command and has lots more power that I can't cover all of it this quickly. Experience lets you get, add, or set levels and experience points. This lets you use the experience bar as a variable if you do it correctly, or as a timer. Fill lets you fill in volumes with blocks with a few options. Destroy makes the blocks you place get mined. Hollow goes on the border and leaves the center as air. Outline does the same, but it clears the inside. Keep only fills the air blocks and replace swaps the block put after it with your target. Force load makes the designated chunks always loaded. This means that commands can be run in those chunks and entities in the chunks can be selected. It sounds bad, but it's not as laggy as having the chunk loaded in a player's render distance. Function is how you play functions in a data pack. Functions themselves are just text files, technically MC function files, where each new line has a new command that is played from top to bottom. Game mode lets you change the player's game mode to spectator, creative, adventure, or survival. Game role lets you set custom game roles that describe how the game behaves. Most are true or false, doing things like disabling mob explosions from destroying blocks, disabling mob spawning, disabling fire spread, or inventory drops. Give is like the opposite of clear. It lets you give the player a specific item of a specific amount with specific MBT, which in this way you can just give yourself a sword that has sharpness of 1,000,000. Help shows you all the commands and
Turning your app into a business can seem like a daunting task.
and their options. Kick lets you kick a player, but they can always return. Kill lets you kill entities, but they will drop their loot. List lists the online players and their UUIDs. Locate gives you the coordinates of the nearest structure like igloos or villages. Locate biome is just like locate, except it tells you the coordinates of the nearest biome. Loot lets you simulate getting loot from loot tables. You can choose various places to put the loot, like give or spawn, and you can loot with various methods like mining or killing. Me sends a message with your name in front of it. Message lets you send a message to a player secretly, except the admins will see it. Particle lets you play particles such as end portals or angry villagers. You can specify the location and distance they can randomly spawn. You can also specify the speed, being how fast they move, and the amount that will spawn. If you change the mode from normal to force, then it will play the particles regardless of the user's settings, such as setting the particles to minimum or none. You can also make them visible to only specific players. PlaySound plays a sound at a location on a specific channel for specific players. You can specify the volume, but that just means how far it can be heard, not how loud it is. You can also specify a pitch between 0 and 2, which also changes the speed. Publish opens your world to LAN at a specific port. Recipe lets you give or take recipes from players. Reload reloads all the data resources, including data packs. Replace item lets you replace a specific item in an inventory container with a specific item and amount. Say makes the command executor say something. It can use selectors in it too. Schedule lets you play a function later. You can specify a time in ticks, seconds, or even days. Normally, you replace the time, so scheduling it twice in a row will just reset the countdown. But in append mode, it will make it play for each time you schedule it. Scoreboard is one of the most useful commands. You can create scoreboards which hold a number for each player. They can count things like how many dirt you mined or how many hunger bars you have. If the type is dummy, then it can only count when you play the command to do so. These scoreboards can be put on the sidebar below the player name or in the player list. It's fairly common to reference player names that don't exist in order to have variables or constants not associated with players. Seed gives you your world seed. Set block places a specific block at a specific location. It features keep, replace, and destroy. Keep only sets the block if the location has air there. Replace replaces any block. Destroy replaces the block and acts as if it were mined. Set world spawn sets the location of the world spawn, which is where new players will spawn. Spawn point lets you designate where a specific player will respawn. Spectate lets you force a player to spectate an entity or player. Spread players lets you randomly teleport a player from a center point to a random coordinate of specified radial distance away. If respect teams is true, then players on the same team will go to the same place, like in ultra-hardcore games. Normally the player will be put on the topmost level, and not over water. However, if you add under and a maximum height, you can spread players inside a building. Stop sound lets you stop a sound that is playing on a specific channel for a specific player. Summon lets you spawn an entity at a specific location and with initial MBT, such as how fast it is or what armor it's wearing. Tag lets you add, remove, or view tags on an entity. These tags can be used to reference entities later so that you don't have to pick every pig or everything with a specific name. Just one that has a tag. Teams let you make teams which you can put entities on. When hostile mobs like zombies are put on the same team as something, it won't attack it. You can make teams have settings that are applied to all players on it, such as friendly fire and name tag visibility. You can also pick players based on the teams, and you can add prefixes and suffixes to their names. Team MSG lets you message everyone on your teams privately, but some servers don't allow this by default. Teleport is the same as TP. You pick an entity to teleport and a location to send it. The location will be based on where your command is run. You can also make the entity face a location or other entity from that destination. You can also TP one entity to another. Tel is the same as MSG and lets you send a message privately. Telraw is like a fancy say command. It lets you send a message to a specific player with JSON formatted text with colors and other modifiers. This JSON formatted text can also be clickable to do other commands in make menus. Time lets you add and set or get the time of day. There are some keywords for specified times like daytime, nighttime, noon. Title lets you display the JSON formatted text of Telraw but in GUI locations. You can specify the time and the text fades in and out, as well as how long it stays. It can be displayed as big text title in the center of the screen or as slightly smaller text as a subtitle. It can also be displayed in the action bar, which is just above the item name. TM is an alias for team message and does the same thing. TP is an alias for teleport. Trigger is a way to edit scoreboards which unopt players have access to. This is useful for allowing players to trigger commands. Weather lets you make it rain or thunder or snow. Most people just use it to make the weather go away. Although you may think the world is infinite, sometimes there is a border. World border lets you adjust that border to be a set value or to shrink or grow it. If you are caught outside of the border, then you take lots of damage. Any redstone outside the world border won't work either. World borders can be a great tool to make time-sensitive minigames come to a close. XP is just an alias for experience. Okay, so that just about sums it up, guys. I went through everything. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Maybe you found out some stuff you didn't know before. Maybe you found out some commands you didn't know existed. But yeah, there is actually 60 commands in this game, and it just keeps expanding. If there's any ones that I don't have, just know that I am in 1.16.2, and I tried to cover everything possible. Anyways, if you guys like that, leave a like, maybe subscribe for more.